And the full moon is
Still waiting
actually
for the-
today,
What?
the 20th. I believe it will be like 10 o'clock tonight or something, 10:48 or something like that. And the full moon of October is known as the hunter moon. So there's a hunter. And it's probably known as a number of other things. I believe it's also called a sanguine moon and a couple other things. So facing the sort of the south, I know it's actually sort of facing southeast, but I wanted to sort of capture everything from, where the sun rises, the ecliptic from the east to the west. This is sort of the constellations we expect to see in the sky this time of year. We've kind of gone from having the summer triangle sort of front and center to basically the cast of the epic movie Clash of the Titans all floating around in front of us here. Here's Perseus, the hero. There's Cepheus and Cassiopeia, the king and queen of Ethiopia, their daughter Andromeda, her hero Perseus, of course. Down here is Cetus, the sea monster, sometimes called the Kraken. And of course,
the Kraken.
Release the Kraken. Of course, Pegasus, the winged horse. That the story goes that Perseus cut off the head of the Gorgon, Medusa, and carried it in a sack and showed it to Cetus, the sea serpent, or the sea monster, the Kraken, turning it to stone, which allowed him to cut Andromeda loose from the rocks she was chained to, and they flew off to be happily ever after on Pegasus, the winged horse. And if we turn around and face the north, well, before I do that, one of the great things about this time of year is that it might not look like it here, but that mark there is the zenith. And you'll notice that the ecliptic is almost halfway between the horizon and the zenith. So that's one of the wonderful things about observing at this time of year, is that the ecliptic is getting very high in the sky at night, as opposed to in the middle of the daytime. And hence the whole reason why it's winter and not summer. So we get to see most of the interesting stuff that follows the ecliptic, like the planets, at a higher angle in the sky, meaning we're looking through less atmosphere. So things tend to be a little sharper and steadier. So if we turn around and face the north, you'll see that now the ecliptic is behind us. There's the zenith, and the ecliptic, this is east over on this side now. And the ecliptic kind of goes like that behind us and down this way, and facing towards the north or the northwest. You'll see that the dipper is now sort of horizontal, the handle pointing down below the horizon. Arcturus, the bright star at the bottom of Boötes, is down below the horizon. Corona Borealis, Hercules, the globular clusters M13 located right about here, and M92 located right about there, are on their way down below the horizon. Here's Polaris. It's not exactly in the center of this image, but Polaris is the point at which our northern axis of rotation points. Therefore, everything in the sky is rotating from east to west around that point. And if you could take a giant compass and put its pin right on Polaris, and the pencil down here on the horizon, and draw a circle around that point, all of those stars and constellations within that circle are what we call circumpolar, meaning they never set. They're always above the horizon. It's just that different ones are visible to us in the nighttime as the Earth rotates around the sun. If we were further north, that point would be higher up in the sky, and the circle that we draw would be much larger. If we were down closer to the equator, that point would be down closer to the horizon, and the circumpolar circle would be much smaller. The summer triangle is kind of bidding us goodbye over towards making its way towards the western horizon here. There's Deneb, Vega, and Altair, and of course the glorious bunch of Messier and other nebulas and other objects that are in that area that we like to see. The M51, sorry, not M51, M57, the Ring Nebula, Vulpecula here, where the home of M27, the dumbbell. There's Sagitta, there's Delphinus, Cygnus, of course, and Aquila the Eagle. They're all leaving us for the season. Yeah, if you were really energetic and got up bright and early in the morning this morning, around 7 o'clock, maybe quarter after 7, just as the sky was brightening in the east, you might have noticed a very bright object, which was Mercury. Mercury is fairly close to the sun right now, but it's far enough away that, and it's bright enough that you can see it just before the sun rises. Just wait a little bit longer, like about till 7:30 or so, and Mars peeks its head just over the horizon. But forget about trying to see it; you won't. It'll be lost in the glare of the sun because the sun is right beside it. And this is all in the constellation of Virgo. Now, if we jump forward to about noon, why would I mention noon? Well, Mercury, Mars, and the sun are all in a nice little line there, but forget about trying to see them in the middle of the day. But around about noon or 1 o'clock-ish, Venus will rise, and Venus is at maximum eastern elongation right now, meaning it's about as far from the sun as it ever gets from our point of view. So Venus is actually, it's visible to us in broad daylight, and it's visible with the naked eye. It's actually very bright. And you might doubt what I say if you've never seen it before, but it is visible. You can see it quite easily with the naked eye. The trouble is finding it, because if it's cloudy, obviously, you won't see nothing. If it's not cloudy, then you have no reference points, and it's just one tiny little white dot in a sea of blue. And it's because of the way our eyes work, it's very, very difficult to track it down, because it isn't, once it gets up high in the sky, it isn't near anything that you can use as a reference point. So when you know it's there and you go looking for it, if you can find it and you can sort of see it in relation to like the top of a tree or maybe a small cloud passing by, it's very easy to see, and you go, wow, there it is. I can see it, easy as pie. If there's nothing near it, your eye is constantly jumping around, and you'll lose it. You'll see it, lose it, see it, lose it, see it, lose it. And you begin to wonder, am I seeing things or is it really there? It's a very intriguing kind of target to look for. If you keep observing though, like you'll see it like from, usually, you want to try and wait till it gets a little bit higher in the sky, but it's far enough away from the sun that you can easily position yourself somewhere so that the sun itself is behind a tree or behind the roof of your house or something, and there's no danger of you looking into the sun. And if you um, uh, you either use a like a your hand span, or your hand spread out as wide as it will go is about 25 degrees. Well, Venus is about 45, 46 degrees from the sun. So you have to go sort of, 25 and 20, try and figure out, how to get about that far from the sun. But if you can find it, it's well worth the effort.
I find, Dave, that one of the best ways I've found it in the daytime is with a pair of binoculars, especially if we know that it's just above the horizon. So you
Yes,
just scan
absolutely.
along the horizon.
Yeah. And if you look through a pair of binoculars, you'll find that you can easily see that it's actually going through a phase like the moon does. It's like a last quarter.
Yeah.
This is what you would see if you can see it through a pair of binoculars. And I've had my binoculars set up, trained on Venus, especially this is cool to do if Venus and the moon are in the sky at the same time and they're reasonably close to each other, because then you got the moon as a reference point. It makes it a lot easier to find Venus. But you can kind of go back and forth between Venus, the moon, Venus, the moon. And I remember showing my daughter this once, and she looked through the binoculars at Venus and she said, that's the moon. She looked, in the sky, and there's the moon, and it's a half moon, same phase as Venus was at the time. No, it's not. And I moved the binoculars, said, there's the moon. And suddenly she saw how big the moon was in the binoculars, and then back to Venus. And wow, like it is kind
I
of
had a few
mind-blowing.
people say this. I had my telescope on at one time in the daytime, and that's what a few people said. Well, it just looks like the moon.
Exactly,
I think it's just
yeah.
the moon we're looking at.
Yes, yeah, it is a pretty cool sort of thing to show people, and especially when you can just kind of point to it and say, well, there it is, that little white spot you see there, broad daylight. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever it is, and that's the planet Venus you're seeing. And
it's funny also during the day how you can see it clearer, like even through the telescope. You can see more of the crescent in the daytime than at night. When you're at night and the sun's gone down, it's so bright it just looks like a white dot.
I hadn't even realized that, but you're right. Yeah, there's a larger contrast at night or something, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's well worth trying, anyways, if you get the opportunity.
So well, to look at it at night, most of the times I put a filter on, like my lunar filter, and I just make it lighter. But
yeah,
because I have a polarized lunar filter, and that works well too. Then you can see the more detail of Venus.
Yes, yeah. Polarizing filters are far more versatile. Rather than just having a neutral density lunar filter for looking at a bright moon, those polarizing filters, it's like two filters, right? Two polarizing lenses, two filters.
Yeah. So you can adjust it to make it darker or lighter.
So that you can go from like about it goes from like a 4% to a 30% or 50% sort of neutral density.
So Dave, that's what's happening in the sky this month, right?
Well, if I just jump ahead a little bit, there's Venus setting. It'll be visible in the night sky to the naked eye quite easily. It's just about the time that the sun goes down. As it's getting dark, Venus will jump out and be quite easily seen. Okay. If we jump forward a little bit further, well, around 7 o'clock at night, our old friend Pluto, the former planet, now dwarf planet, will be crossing the meridian, but don't bother trying to see it because it's about 15th magnitude. So yeah, you won't have a chance in hell. So
the only person who can see that is Bob, even without his telescope.
And then a little while later, about 10:30, Saturn and Jupiter will sort of bookend the meridian. And those are always fun to look at. Saturn, of course, with its rings and all its moons. It's very bright right now. And of course, Jupiter And I didn't think, I meant to look up and see when there would be any transits, and I forgot to do that. But you can get that information from many of the online web sources. Whenever one of the Galilean, well, whenever any of the moons, but particularly the Galilean moons, pass between Jupiter and the Sun, they'll cast, well, if they pass between the Earth and Jupiter, you'll see the planet itself transiting the face of Jupiter. And if they pass between the Sun and Jupiter, you'll see their shadow basically traveling across the face of Jupiter. And it's not unheard of to see 2 or 3 transits at one time, maybe a transit of 1 or 2 moons and a shadow or 2 as well. So that's something to watch for. Neptune is also going to be approaching the meridian somewhere around 11 o'clock at night. Neptune's a little bit, it's the farthest planet, and although it's a gas giant, it's pretty small in a telescope, and it's just past, sort of just on the border, just beyond the edge of naked eye visibility. So it's close to about magnitude 8, but it is very bluish, or I guess different people might interpret that color as different things, but it has a quite identifiable, unique color. So if you get in the right ballpark, you will find it, because it's a different color from all the stars around it. And then, of course, if you feel like staying up past midnight, around 1 or 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning, the moon and Uranus, or Uranus, will be approaching the meridian. Of course, full moon looks like that, as we're all used to seeing. And Uranus, well, Uranus doesn't really look like that. Uranus looks like that, with all of its Shakespearean moons. Most of the moons of Uranus are named after characters in the Shakespeare play A Midsummer Night's Dream. Once you find Uranus, you'll find that you can actually see it with the naked eye, if it's a dark enough location. It's just on the good side of being naked eye visible. It's just a little bit brighter than the sort of nominal limit. And then if you're really, really keen, you stay up till about 3 or so in the morning, pass some time looking at the Pleiades, 7 sisters, in Taurus, the bull. That's the face of Taurus, the bull, of course. That's his shoulder. Or that's M45 is the Pleiades, or M42 is the Orion Nebula. This is Stellar Nursery. This is a Reflection Nebula. If you're really keen, it wouldn't be that easy to do right now with the moon, full moon in the sky. And over the next couple of nights, the moon is going to be moving even closer to Ceres. But because Ceres is relatively close to Aldebaran, a very bright star in the Hyades here, it might be worth trying to see if you can spot Ceres. You really would have to use Stellarium or some other software program like that to draw yourself or print out a fairly accurate picture of the relationship of the positions of all these stars, to try and single out which one is Ceres. And then, to be sure that you've got it right, you'd have to do the same thing the next night or a couple of nights later and see if it moves. If it moves, this is what happens in 24 hours. It would move about like that. So if you see a jump like that in one object in that field of view, that'll be Ceres. And you can congratulate yourself that you've managed to find the World Series. And if you then since you've been up till 4 o'clock in the morning, if you hang around long enough, it'll be 7 o'clock. Mercury will be rising again. And it's time to go back to bed. And so that's the sky this month.
Nicely done, Dave.
Wow, great job, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah,
Thanks, Dave.
interesting. Yep.